The next thing that we need to talk about is the cranial nerves, and with the cranial nerves, I'd like to talk about a concept of cell columns. So basically, all the cranial nerve nuclei lie in a series of incomplete cell columns, and each of the columns has a particular function. And it's easy to think of the functions of the cranial nerves if we use these columns as a framework. So first off, first important concept with the cranial nerve columns is that there are afferent nuclei columns and efferent nuclei columns. Afferent nuclei columns are formed, so there's three afferent nuclei columns. The first of these is concerned with supply of general sensation to the face and forehead, and this nuclear column is known as the general somatic afferent column. The next column is concerned with perception of sound as well as in maintaining equilibrium, and this column is known as the special somatic afferent column. The final afferent column is concerned with visceral supply. So this is both special visceral supply, which concerns taste, and general visceral supply, so general visceral sensation. And this is known as the general visceral afferent column, the visceral afferent column. With the efferent nuclei, once again, there are three columns. The first is concerned with supply of somatic muscle, and in the head and neck. This means the striated muscles of the orbit as well as the tongue. The next set of nuclei that we've got is the branchial nuclei, and the branchial nuclei are concerned with the the branchial nuclei are concerned with the supply of striated muscles which originate from the branchial arches. So this includes like the muscles of mastication, the muscles that come up over the face, and also the muscles of the larynx and pharynx. The final efferent nuclei column that we have is the visceral efferent nuclei, and this is concerned with the parasympathetic supply of the head and neck, and in fact the whole gastrointestinal tract, until the distal two-thirds of the transverse column. So in order to understand the position of the cranial nerve nuclei within the brainstem, the first place to look would be actually the development of the brainstem. The brainstem, as it's developing, is actually a tube. It starts off as a tube, and it has a ventral or anterior motor part with a dorsal sensory part. Within the motor part, we've got three sets of nuclei columns. So from medial to lateral, we have the somatic column, then the branchial column, then the visceral column. It should be noted that the branchial column actually lies on a further ventral plane to the somatic column. With the sensory nuclei, we've got from lateral to medial the visceral column, the special sensory column, and finally we have the general somatic sensory column. As the brainstem develops, this tube basically opens out and flattens out to form an arrangement like this. And what we get is the sensory nuclei, which originally were posterior to the motor nuclei, come to lie laterally, and the motor nuclei come to lie medially. So that's the first thing that you need to understand in terms of the adult brainstem. The next thing that we need to understand is the basic position of the nuclei in relation to each other basically preserved. So from medial to lateral, the columns that we have in the adult are the somatic motor, the branchial motor, then we have the visceral motor behind. Remember, the branchial motor lies on a further anterior plane to the somatic and visceral motor nuclei. The moving further laterally from this, we then have the visceral afferent nuclei. then the special somatic afferent nuclei, and furthest laterally we have the general somatic afferent nuclei. The general somatic afferent nuclei, it should be noted, actually lies on a slightly anterior plane to the special somatic nucleus as well. What we're going to do now is have a look at which cell groups lie in each of the columns. So we'll start off with the afferent cell groups, and the first cell group that we'll start off with is the general somatic sensory column. The general somatic sensory column is formed almost entirely by the nuclei of cranial nerve 5. So these nuclei are basically arranged into three main parts. So we've got a mesencephalic nucleus in the midbrain, a chief sensory nucleus in the pons, and extending from the lower pons through the medulla we have a spinal trigeminal nucleus. We've got a spinal trigeminal nucleus as well. Moving our attention now to the visceral column. It should be noted that the visceral column is represented by only one group of cells, and this is the nucleus tractus solitarius. The final afferent column, the tractus solitarius, before we move on from the tractus solitarius, is connected to by taste fibers from cranial nerve 7 and 9, and is also connected to by general visceral fibers from cranial nerves 9 and 10. Finally, the special somatic column is formed only by cranial nerve 8, and is constituted by the cochlea and vestibular nuclei. We're now ready to talk about the efferent nuclei columns. The first efferent nuclei column to consider is the somatic nuclei column, and this consists of, from above to below, the nuclei of cranial nerves 3, so the oculomotor nucleus, cranial nerve 4, the trochlear nucleus, cranial nerve 6, the abducens nucleus, and the hypoglossal nucleus as well. The next column to consider is the branchial motor column, and the branchial motor column, it should be noted, from above to below, consists of cell groups for cranial nerve 5. We're going to talk about the visceral motor column actually first, and this consists of cell groups firstly for cranial nerve 3, so the Edinger-Westphal nucleus sends parasympathetic fibers along cranial nerve 3 for supply of the eye. After this, we've got the salivatory nuclei, which connect to cranial nerve 7 and 9, and below this finally we have the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus, and that completes the visceral efferent column. The branchial efferent column consists of, above to below, a nuclear group which connects with cranial nerve 5, known as the motor nucleus, so the trigeminal nerve. Below this we have the primary facial nucleus, and then we have the nucleus ambiguus, and the nucleus ambiguus connects to cranial nerves 9, 10 and also 11, and it helps supply the pharynx and larynx. That's the main purpose of it. Finally, we also have some cervical fibers from the accessory nerve, which are responsible for supply of the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid muscles.